Welcome to the Reasons to Reason podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sal Galati. This is the show that's going to talk about all the things we're not supposed to: God, religion, and politics. So strap in, prepare to get offended, and maybe, just maybe, our nation can learn how to reason again. Thanks for joining us. I'm sure you're going to be glad you did. We got a great guest today, Ted Dabrowski, running for governor in the state of Illinois. And I want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank you all for sharing the show. Continue to share the show. Post it around. As you know, I'm not on social media. I kind of don't want to do any of that stuff. Word of mouth. We're speaking truth here on this show in a lot of different arenas, and we need your help to continue to get the word out. So send it to your friends, family, put it on your Facebook or whatever, email it out, text it out. It's on all the platforms. A little longer form interviews where you get to hear the candidate talk about what matters versus the garbage that they tell us on the news. I actually know him from a website he ran, a news website he ran called Wire Points. Really appreciated it because it was just information. It wasn't news. What do I mean by that? It wasn't emotionally driven. It was just data, really practical. Talked a lot about kind of the financial situation of our state, that it's reckless and unsustainable. And if you just want information, it's a great place to go. It's still going. He's not running anymore. Now he's running for governor. But he came in. I want to ask him a few questions. And let me introduce you to Ted.
Well, hey, Sal, thanks for having me here. So, yes, I'm running for governor after 15 years of running Wire Points. After 15 years of doing public policy, the last 8 doing Wire Points. I've covered a lot of the problems in Illinois, the financial problems, the education problems, the loss of people, the loss of businesses. I've been frustrated, working hard to show people the problems and show them the solutions too, the path to making us better. And after doing that for a long time, I said, heck, I can't keep complaining. I got to get in there and lead. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm running for governor, and I love this state. It's an amazing state. I always say we should be a top 5 state in everything, for jobs, for growth, for prosperity, and instead we're a bottom 5 state. And my aim is to change that. And let's compete with Texas and Florida and Tennessee and Carolina. Let's not be at the bottom.
I love that. We do have an amazing state, and it's terrible that these policies are ruining it. I wanted to ask some questions that will highlight what really are the issues in our state instead of what the news wants to make it about, which is mostly nonsense. I see that there is an insane amount of layers of government within our state. We have layer upon layer, township upon township, just a bunch of people. No one knows what they do. Explain to the voter how that is interfering in their lives, how that maybe adds to their tax burden, how that adds to regulation, inability to start a business, things like that. What is something you could do to help with that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you make that your first question, because it kind of hits at the very problem we have in Illinois, and that it's just this massive bureaucracy, massive corruption, and the way you get that is by having the most units of local government in the country. So that means you've got school districts out the wazoo, you've got townships, you've got all these mosquito abatement, you've got the library districts and the park districts. And the more government units you have, and I love local government. I think government should be very local. But when you start having overlapping and duplicative units of government, then you have a problem, because then you're starting to just have bureaucrats in excess. And so, you can look at a property tax bill in Illinois, and you can see how many governments are on your tax bill. And if you wanted to be a watchdog and try to actually go out and see what's happening in your area of influence, my God, you'd be sitting in board meetings all the time. You can never keep up with what's going on. I've tried to keep up with what's going on in my community as a watchdog, but I've got too many school districts. You got the park district, you got the library district, you got the city, you got the county. There's no way. And you know what? None of those units of government cooperate. They don't coordinate their taxes. They all race to raise taxes. And you're touching on an issue which is, wow, if you could just dramatically slash the units of government, you're going to make this affordability issue. We have this massive, highest property taxes in the country. You could really take a big cut out of those taxes if you just got rid of all these units of government and the number of bureaucrats in them who all, by the way, get massive pay.
To me, I see everything from like a criminal element mentality, for good or for worse. Like, what's the benefit of having all these layers to the people in power? You can never hold anyone accountable. Go to a school board, try to hold them accountable, but they point to this commission or that committee or that place. To me, it's by design. So it's not good for the voter. There's no voter out there, unless they're benefiting from a family member in one of these positions and getting paid or getting a pension from it. No benefit to the voter. So this is an easy issue, no matter where your political ideology is. What could you do? What is the process? You understand how to do this stuff. That's what I want the voters to hear.
Yeah, so let me talk about, I live in the North Shore. I live in Wilmette, and there's two different examples of this too much local government. So in Wilmette, we have a city, right? The village of Wilmette. But we also have this park district, which operates totally independent. It's pretty much coterminous. So you have the city, the library, the park. Why isn't it just one unit of government where they have one tax base? And then we can hold that one government accountable. And you'd end up getting rid of lawyers and bookkeepers and all that. And you could have one computer system, whatever. You could dramatically bring it all together. And then I could go to one meeting and track what the heck's going on. But today it doesn't work. So that's one massive waste. And if you see the salaries and the pensions and all that for all these bureaucrats, and again, I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about the system. It's too much. Now, the other one that's even worse is our school system. So we have the New Trier High School District, big, powerful New Trier. Now, within pretty much almost coterminous within the high school district, there are 6 elementary feeder districts. Each one is separate. They have their own fiefdoms, they have their own superintendents, and all the staff that goes with that. Each one of the 7 in total, 7 superintendents, all make more than $300,000 a year. And you can imagine what the pensions are like. And eventually, when they retire, they're all making 400 and something. It's massive duplication. And my gosh, when you start looking at the teams that each district has, again, it could all be collapsed. And you could do this statewide. Many counties have or areas have one unit district. They're already, let's say, coordinated, but not up here. And the amount of money being spent is massive, and that's why property taxes are so high.
You talk about the money being spent. I look at it, the money being made. They've made a business out of it, and we had Doge on the federal side. To what extent that actually hashed anything out? But what you just said was information. It wasn't what you hear on the news. And that's what people need to be. They need to be informed and know that when someone says, hey, our schools are spending too much money, it's not about giving less to teachers. We want more to teachers, better academic results. We're going to get to education next. But obviously there's too many people making too much money doing nothing. And actually, to fill their time, they're actually doing destructive things, importing ideologies and nonsense that's not necessary in the school. So that leads me to my second question. To me, I see the education system in Illinois as we could look at it federally, but there's a governor's race. It is a monopoly. And, within the last 6 months, they tried to pass a bill actually to hamper and make it more difficult to be a homeschooler, which to me is just, why would the government be upset about that? Here are people that are disenfranchised by the system. They want to do their own thing. They're still paying taxes, and now you want to harm them even more. I know what the sinister element is and coercing people to have to use this product. But tell me about the monopoly. How do we break up the monopoly? How do we improve the results? Because even in the districts where we're spending a ton of money, the results aren't great. And we don't have to talk about the South Side. We did a couple interviews with some women from the South Side. We know what's going on down there. It's tragic. They're illiterate. They can't read. They can't write. They can't reason. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I didn't answer your question all the way in the first one, but in the end, you have to collapse these units of government, right? So to answer that, and let me just give you the example. In Illinois, we have 850 school districts. In Florida, they have 67. One for each county. So, there's a great opportunity just to collapse these. Now, anything we would try to do here in Illinois would be a big fight with the unions, of course. So I don't mean to say everything is easy, but that's what has to happen.
Quick follow-up: is that from the executive office? Is that from a legislative thing?
Yeah, it's all going to be legislative. It's all going to be legislative, and don't forget that a couple of years ago they passed Amendment 1 in Illinois, which put all the collective bargaining powers into the Constitution. We gave the unions even more power. There's no back to your point about things being done by design. Absolutely being done by design. They put the powers of the unions, the most amazing, powerful, and I mean amazing in a bad way, of course. Powers into the Constitution, and now to get rid of those powers, we'll have to pass another constitutional amendment. So we're in big trouble for that.
Well, with the work you did at Wire Points, shows like this, get the word out, inform people. People need information to know what the issues actually are, because if you watch the news, you're not getting the actual issues. But tell us about the education monopoly and how you see to rectify that.
Yeah, so I always talk about it as 2 monopolies, and you're back to, again, by design. So you got 2 monopolies. One monopoly is the teachers' monopoly, and those are the teachers' union. And the best example of that, of course, is the Chicago Teachers Union. Massively powerful. I always remind people that the unions aren't powerful by themselves. The lawmakers give them all those powers. And so if you want to take those powers away, it's the lawmakers who have to do it. The unions aren't going to give up their powers. They're just going to use them. So, but you got the union, the monopoly from teachers, and you got the monopoly on schools. And those are the administrators. That's the government. These 2 monopolies or duopolies, they work together. They fight every once in a while. They strike against each other, make big battles, but in the end, they work together. And look, nobody wants to upset that apple cart because we're spending billions. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs. You're talking about billions in pensions. Nobody wants to mess that up. As bad as it is, nobody wants to mess with it. The homeschoolers, a great fight. The parents who want school choice, a great fight. We have to fight this monopoly because they're not going to give up power.
And you mentioned it's a bunch of jobs, right? But they're not productive jobs. Maybe this, to the extent you want to talk more about education, we could talk about it. But like we talked GDP back in 20 years ago and we compare it to GDP today. In our state, we talk about the country not making anything. Our state doesn't really make much anything because the environment's so terrible for business. The only industries that are growing, in my estimation, you could fact check me, I don't know, but the only things I see opening up is gambling, marijuana dispensaries, and abortion clinics. That seems to be our big industry, and we ask people to come in and celebrate how do we make this state actually make things again, have productive jobs? If we have to cut 50,000 of those bureaucratic jobs, make them do something for a private company that's actually making something. How do we set that up? We got to reallocate. The only job growth in this country can't be from those three industries and the government.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point. And every time I say we should close school districts and cut government units, people are saying, oh, but those are jobs. Those are people working. I'm like, well, yes, they're jobs. I put it between quotes, but they're not productive jobs because they're duplicative or they're not doing anything. They're not productive. They're not creating anything. So we would be much better off reducing all those units of government, laying off all those people, lowering the tax base so that we can attract businesses again and growth. And then those people who lost their jobs would eventually find themselves in productive jobs. And that's how it should be. These are unproductive jobs. And when you look at these school districts, I can't miss talking about this because it's my passion. You look at schools in Peoria, in Decatur, Rockford, and Waukegan, and Cicero. You're talking about minority children where maybe 10% of the kids can read a grade level, 15% maybe. It's sad, it's horrific. And the only thing I know is that everybody knows it. The system knows it, the same people you're talking about. They know the kids can't read in the third grade, but they move them to the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, move them through all the way. They graduate them, celebrate 80% graduation rates when only 10% of the black children, for example, can read a grade level. And to me, that's the biggest sin. It's the biggest, I don't know what to call it. If I were using bad words, I'd use bad words. But for me, we're throwing kids under the bus every single day. And so if there's one thing that I would do tomorrow as governor is obsess about literacy and obsess about accountability, because right now, nobody cares. And again, I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but the system is a massive failure. It doesn't work.
And this goes into the interviews we had a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think any of this is by accident. Because then those kids are exploited by the people in power to keep power, by setting the standards so low that all they could aspire for is to get food stamps and housing subsidies. And that's their whole existence, to get those things. When they're not seeking to do anything more, it's a tragedy, is what it is. It's dangerous as a society. We cannot sustain. We must protect our youth. We must educate our youth, or how can we maintain a republic?
Are you looking for an affordable Christian education for your children that supports your values? For 20 years, Classical Consortium Academy has been doing just that. With 2 days of classical Christian instruction on campus and the rest at home, CCA's hybrid model gives you the best of both worlds, a deep learning and time together. And this fall, CCA is opening a brand new Glenview campus at Cornerstone Church. Discover the education you've been praying for at classicalconsortiumacademy.org. Enroll today.
Yeah, we can't maintain a republic. We can't have a workforce. I mean, how do you have a workforce of whole generations that can't read and do math? I can see why you think it's by design, because Governor Pritzker, it's interesting. You listen to him. He's proud that we have more people on food stamps. He's proud that we have more people on Medicaid. And I'm like, no, it should be the opposite. You should be happy when you're getting people off of Medicaid, when you're getting people off of food stamps, because that means your economy's prosperous and you're doing better, and people find a real meaning in life and they're working. Instead, these failing schools where you can't read and you can't do math, guess what? You're right. You're going to live a life of government dependence. I mean, obviously not everybody. There's a few people who break out, but for the most part, you're going to have more people dependent, and that's a killer.
See, the thing about Pritzker, he reveals his heart when he talks like that, because he doesn't expect or think they can do any better. He doesn't have value for them other than, throwing them peanuts and getting their votes. It's a worldview problem. There's no value for life. No one should look at a situation and their heart shouldn't break. No, the fact that those words uttered his mouth and he thought it was a good thing tells me his character. Here you are. We talked a little bit about policy and stuff. Tell me what's driving you. This isn't a fun thing to do. People think people run for governor because they want power or whatever. I know enough about you just from hearing from you. You rather not have to do this. You wish someone else would step up and do a good job, but you're seeing that no one's doing it and you want to give it a go. Tell me why Wider Point started. Tell me why this race is now the next endeavor you're pursuing.
Yeah, so you're right. I didn't think I'd ever be running for governor. I always thought that, at Wider Point's and the Illinois Policy Institute, I and a whole bunch of other people, I'm not the only one, we're putting out good ideas. We're showing the problems. We're showing the states that do things well. Look at the Floridas, look at the Texas, look at the Tennessee. They're rocking. They're attracting people. They're attracting investment. They don't have the problems we do. So I always thought that somebody was going to take the ideas that I was putting out and put them to use. Nobody has. And I finally said, I looked at the last election and I tried to help out, but it didn't work. And so I said, hey, I've been doing this. I feel good about what I think about things. I feel really good about who I am. My parents, both immigrants, my dad from Poland, my mom from Ecuador. I got the values from them of faith and family and responsibility and education and it's part of my deep Catholic faith. And wow, I just said, hey, this is a moment to lead. And so I just think that this is a state that should be, as I said before, should be competing with the best states in the country. And it's not about that. It's about we're an immigrant family and. We had to go bottom up like a lot of immigrant families do. And I see so many families now struggling in Illinois that they leave, that they're forced to flee. These property taxes are squeezing people out of their homes. It's really sad, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think of the little guy. I was a little guy once. This should be a great state, and we have to make opportunities for everybody.
I'm a child of immigrants. That's actually an issue that is obviously in the news, and it upsets me because how that's another group that are just being exploited. Conflating immigration traditionally was what it was, and immigration is what really vicious, wicked people have used to exploit people. I'll just say my feelings of it. I'm not going to put words in your mouth to let you answer the question. The only sane actors in the prior administration in that whole border crisis were the people migrating from the south to the north. The politicians weren't the sane actors. They were lying to the people, and they incentivized people to come here. And they've only destabilized and destroyed communities here. Not, quite frankly, communities like the one I live in, where the majority of people voted for that policy, communities that are already at a deficit when it comes to finances, infrastructure, education. That's where the people were put. Immigration is a pro-America thing. America is a pro-immigrant. I'm a pro-immigration guy, the right kind of immigration. What they didn't hear was terrible. We have ICE looking to extract criminals, mostly in my estimation. I know that the narratives and the politics are at play, but really there's some brutal people that are here that need to get out. How do you think of our governor's handling of the federal involvement in our state, and what would you do differently?
Yeah, first I'd say that I echo a lot of what you said. My parents being immigrants, I love immigrants. I love the immigrant community. But again, I love law and order, and I love real borders. I mean, you can't have a country if you don't have borders. So it's been destructive, and what Biden and the crew did is destructive for our country. Governor Pritzker played a major part in that by passing all these welcoming programs he did, right? Free health care, free housing, free this, free that. Like you said, these are poor people from poor countries looking for something different, and Pritzker incentivized them. So it's not surprising that we had so many people come here. And like you said, the problem has been is that the people came to where we can least afford it, right? So that's of course made a big problem for the black community. But Pritzker's actions have been, in my opinion, disqualifying him from governor. He has called our federal enforcement. Well, first of all, he wouldn't work with the federal enforcement. If he had just simply handed over bad guys in handcuffs from the local jails to the federal authorities, there would be no chasing down bad guys. There wouldn't be the chaos. But he wouldn't do that, and so that forced ICE to go track them down. We've seen how many violent criminals there have been, and that's created the chaos. The second part that I think is fully disqualifying is Pritzker calling federal law enforcement jackbooted thugs, terrorists, all kinds of names like that, inciting the kind of violence we've seen in Illinois against federal authorities. So it's created a big mess, and I think for that alone, Pritzker shouldn't be governor because he's actually attacking federal law.
Yeah, the real scandal is they wanted the chaos. I know people in law enforcement. That was the deal. The federal government wanted to just go into prisons and extract the criminals, have the local police tell them where the violent criminals were. They would not assist. They would not help. And then they said, all right, we got to go in. And if we roll up some people extra, we're going to roll them up. This show is officially sponsored by American Rose Coffee. They're not just a coffee company. They're about fueling bold ideas and real conversations. Every roast is crafted for people who think deeply, challenge the norm, and live with purpose. If you want coffee that matches that mindset, head to AmericanRoastCoffee.com. That's American Roast Coffee. Bold coffee, bold conversations.
Yeah, and this is things that people in Illinois don't understand. In Illinois, we're on the extreme. When it comes to not working with federal authorities, we're on the extreme wrong end. States like Florida, like Tennessee, like Indiana, local law enforcement must work with federal authorities. There's not a they must. It's law. In Illinois, it's the opposite. It's prohibited. That's how extreme we are.
So I have a theory. I study the Bible, and in one of the books of the Bible, Moses is writing down the law and saying, hey, when you get into your land and you have a king, the king should write down the law in their own handwriting. And it's interesting because that would prove that the king at least read the law once. And I joke that when the governors take office and when a president takes office, from now on, they could do a speech on another day. The thing they should do is read the Constitution to the people, and that would prove that at least the governor read it once, and the people, who probably don't know what it says either, would have heard it once, and we would realize what they're doing is completely unconstitutional. The people are just uninformed. We could have rights, we could have laws, but if no one knows what they are, it kind of gets handled the way it has been. You have anything to add to that?
No, I like that. I've never heard that, but it's a pretty good idea. I do think that just as a separate thing, you also can respect the Constitution and what it means if you just see how corrupted other places have been. And I guess people forget the value of the Constitution when things are so good in this country. But I always talk about my father escaping from communist Poland. That's where you see everything go amok. When he left, people had the economic freedoms were gone, individual freedoms were gone, and it took me a long time to figure him out, but once I understood why he was so passionate about America and freedom and the Constitution, and once I went to Poland, I got it, man. You got to fight and protect the heck out of that Constitution.
That is why a healthy immigration policy is actually lifeblood for a republic of our kind, because you bring people from those places, they don't ever want to let it happen again. They're not bringing people over from Cuba, because the Cuban strongholds will never allow these policies to take hold. They fight fervently against it. Are there any issues that are on your heart that I didn't bring up that you'd like to talk about?
Crime is the other one that we didn't talk about in detail. And crime in theory could be not solved, but you could really create a safe city, get that going. And I think that's the other big opportunity we have right now, because if we don't get the schools right and they don't get the jobs right and all that, people keep leaving just because of crime alone. So, this Safety Act has to go. We have to get back to rebuilding police morale. That's point number one. Build police morale, because without police morale, you can't have public safety. And then, get rid of these laws that are letting bad guys back out on the streets the next day or the same day. Allow car chases, allow foot chases. There's so much we can do just to get back to some good law and order, because if people don't feel safe, the state will continue, especially Chicago, will continue to be in trouble.
Police, and I've known this now for a while, and talking to them, they go, Sal, if they just let us do a job for a year, we'd have the crime down 90%. They know where all the bad guys are, and you start putting a few bad guys away and coming down hard, it just stops, or it slows down. And the one thing the government should do is provide a safe environment. They always talk about, we got to invest in these communities and do this and that. If you can't provide safety, you throw all the money in the world, it's just getting stolen. The money's getting stolen. We talked about that in other interviews. Provide a safe environment, businesses will come in. You don't have to coerce businesses to come in. They want to make money. It's a market. The people spend money. People need food. I want to end it with this. People have heard you speak here a little bit. They want to support you. What could they do to help the campaign? How do they reach out to you? How do they talk? And how could you make the average Illinoisan's life better?
I start with, I think, the opportunities. We have to bring hope back to Illinois. Too many people shrug their shoulders and say, this is Cook County, or if you live in southern Illinois, you just say, hey, they don't care about us. It's a real mess. And so I do think that we have to think about, hey, we can be a great state like we were when my parents immigrated here, right? Everybody wanted to be in Illinois. Everybody wanted to be in Chicago 60 years ago when my parents came. And we should fight to get back to that kind of mentality. So, at tedforillinois.com is where you can learn about me and my campaign. What I do want to say is that everybody has a choice in this primary that's coming up. And I think what's important to understand is, for everybody who's looking, you have to find the person you think can beat Pritzker, in the general. And I argue that's me because, I'm from Cook County. My running mate, who's an ER doctor, she's also from Cook County. She really is a good conservative that understands how to operate within Cook County and the suburbs. And we're the ones, I think, that professionally we know how to get along within Cook County and the suburbs. Because whoever wins, whoever's going to beat Pritzker has to do well in Cook County and the suburbs. And we're that group. And I think my executive experience, my half Latino, half Polish, helped me in Cook County. So it's I think it's the big opportunity for us. I think Pritzker's super vulnerable, and it's so extreme, the things that he's doing, that I think people are looking finally for something different. And I think we're the campaign that can offer that.
Yeah, you hit it. It's demoralization, and it's a tactic of certain ideologies to demoralize the people to not participate. What's the point? They're going to steal it anyway. Whatever they say, get involved is what you're saying. And I would say just give people that idea of hope, and you can make it better. Not a false hope, not a fake hope.
Right.
Just like this common sense things that you've been advocating for on your website. 1 + 1 does not equal 3; it equals 2. Mm-hmm. And we have to act that way again. I'm going to offer a little bit of my advice, and then I'll let you get the last word. Don't listen to consultants, Ted. Go after that voter that doesn't participate because he goes, what's the point? Speak to him. Don't run the same game that all the other politicians run and try to eke by. And be yourself. Speak the truth. Let the cards lie where they lie. I appreciate you running. I know it takes a lot, and thanks for coming in for this, and I'll let you have the last word.
No, I love it. I can only be myself, and I totally agree with you. As I mentioned, we as an immigrant family, we figured out how to make it, and it was hard work, faith, and education, and it's what I want for every dadgum family, right? And I know the wealthy people, they need help too because they want to succeed too, but there's so many everyday Illinoisans that are just barely eking by, and we have to help them succeed and have their share of the American dream.
Thanks for joining us, Ted. Godspeed. Peace.
Sing it!
Thanks for joining us for another episode. I hope I got you thinking and out of your comfort zone. Believe me, the biggest fear your government has is a population that is thinking and talking to one another. So get out there, take a risk, start a conversation, make a friend, and reason with each other. Share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. I wish you peace and love.